I like that everybody's supporting their team member.
I always have mental points, Caroline. 30 years of mental points. I don't know if they can be like cashed in, but.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, just do the slideshow.
Yeah, I thought I did. Let me see. Hold on. Okay, got it.
Great. So we'll just do a few minutes of announcements before we get started and turn it over to the speakers. Do you want to just click to the next slide? We will send all of these by, we'll send a roundup note to the partners group, but we wanted to point out some dates that are upcoming. The first is just an encouragement for everyone to apply for the NNIP Impact Award, which many of you have always have applied in the past. We tried to make the application not so onerous, so it's definitely not too late. If you have an idea, we're happy to talk over ideas also, that if you have any, and we want to see sort of both small and large changes. Any impact is welcome. So the benefits are that it will give you some discipline to put together a story for your own work and documentation and partners locally. We do write a story about every application that we receive that goes on the NNIP website and is publicized there. And then the winner gets the hotel room paid for the NNIP meeting, which is we're working on setting, but is looking like September. So please, it would also be helpful if you'd just, you know how Leah and I worry, if you would just drop a note if you intend to apply, that would be helpful, because there's always that, you know, I might, we just want to make sure we have a good pool, and we already have a team of judges, George from Robert Wood Johnson, Chris from Casey, Jennifer Tran from Policy Link, to be part of the and then usually, and an executive committee member will join to be part of the committee. I sent a reminder about office hours next week, so you can sign up for Kathy, that's me, or Leah. In April, we'll be doing buddy coffee pairing. So we send out like request that for people who don't opt out, we send out a request for you to connect with one of the partner staff as an in-between networking event for in between the in-person meetings. And May 3rd is the next idea showcase. And then finally, no date set yet, but we'll be moving on with our racial equity goals. We're looking at the one that partners with communities and organizations of color to have some peer learning and discussion around that. Next. We have been very busy working on the strategic planning process. This is a special process with CSR Communications that we got dedicated funding from the Casey Foundation to undertake. We had a really great meeting in February. The committee is Amy Carroll Scott from Philly, Katie Pritchard, an alumni from Miami, Lamar Gardier from New Orleans, and Noah Urban from Detroit. So it was a day to imagine the future, sort of how we would like to evolve, and a framework for moving forward. There are some interim materials that we've been working on that we haven't shared. They're a little messy, but if you want to get in the nitty gritty, I'm very we're very happy to share the messy documents with you. And then we spent time going over this, talking through what these three categories of things. I thought that you might be interested in the Venn diagram, or you might be able to use this brainstorming framework locally about things that we're passionate about, things that we're best or could be best in the world of, and then things that people will pay for on the economic side, and thinking about for the planning, sort of what's the Venn diagram of all of those things as we plan for the next stages are to come up with some draft goals. I'll be sending a note in a couple of days for our March 30th town hall, where everybody will be able to present those to all of you. We've been letting the executive committee know things along the way. And just a reminder about our deliverables, which is June, maybe June. It feels very fast, but having a strategic plan, framework, rollout strategy, messaging, implementation tools, sort of a whole package of materials that we're working towards this summer. So if you both have any advice for us on strategic planning, or any reactions along the way, or want to be more engaged than when we touch base with the whole partnership, just let us know. So that's all I had, and I will turn it back to Cole.
All right, thanks, Kathy. So now we will be getting into our panelists for today. Unfortunately, Jennifer Newcomer she just informed me that her son is very sick, so she will not be able to present today, but she sends her apologies and invites anyone to connect with her directly if they want to over her project on involuntary displacement in Denver. But so our two now speakers today, we have Jeanette Parra from Community Information Now. She'll be presenting on their new Bexar Data Dive platform. And we have Trish Abelo from the Dorothy Johnson Center for Philanthropy. She'll be talking about the results from their BIPOC survey of nonprofit leaders. So first, we're going to have Jeanette speak, and so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. Okay, so now I can share my screen. Hi, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm Jeanette with Community Information Now, and I'm here to present on Fair Data Dive. So can everybody hear me okay? Can I just get like a thumbs up? So, okay, cool. Thank you. I also like making people do that. So all right, so Fair Data Dive, and we are Community Information Now, short CNOW. Our mission is to improve lives and decrease disparities through democratized data. All that means is that it's data that's accessible and easy to understand. So Fair Data Dive, which we will present today, is a perfect embodiment of this mission. We wanted to make something that was accessible. It's just a website, no need to register for it. And it's absolutely beginner friendly with the option to take a deeper dive into the data. So I can confidently say that anybody from any data background will have fun using the site. But before we jump into it, I want to explain what SSAs are. These are statistical small areas. They were created by the team to better reflect our real neighborhoods and barrios. And they use census tracts and cluster analysis of demographic variables such as race and ethnicity, educational attainment, mobility, income, housing, and age to kind of reflect what makes neighborhoods neighborhoods. So whereas we traditionally use zip codes or census tracts to identify regions on a map, our SSAs are based on these things like race, ethnicity, age, to hopefully better communicate data in like a community sense. So without further ado, this is the site for Fair Data Dive. It's dive.cnow.info. But if you're anything like me, you can just Google it, and it should be the very first search result that pops up. So just Google Fair Data Dive and you'll reach our site. This is our homepage. Right away, you're going to see that our 3 tools are available right away, including our first one, which is My Community. It's the easiest and quickest way to get information. Everything's just 2 clicks away. And then we have Explore Data, which we'll explore further with a very specific example shortly. And then we have Tables and Downloads, which is really just in a table format. It's download friendly, but it's another avenue for exploring data. You can reach any of these tools by clicking on Go, or you can hover over the left menu bar, and you'll see that we have our homepage, each of the tools, as well as additional navigation options such as announcements, frequently asked questions, and 2 ways to communicate with us. we're going to look at about the data really quickly because this is where we have all of our indicators. So everything is defined on here. We have an index where they're sorted by category, or you can explore it on the left pane where we have everything listed. For each of the indicators, you're going to see that we have the title, we have the definition, we have data notes, we have the source of the data and the link to the source. Data transparency is really important to us. So on each of our pages, each of our screens, you're always going to see a little info button that will take you back to this page. So if you're ever wondering what that indicator means, you can always go back to this. And if we go back to our homepage using that left navigation bar, you're going to see that our most recent announcement is that we just launched Fair Data Dive in Espanol. You can just click on the Espanol button on the top right-hand corner and everything gets translated in Spanish. So all of the tools, all of the data, all of the definitions, everything is in Spanish. So we're really proud about that. Now, as promised, I'm going to show y'all a very specific example using Explore Data. That's our second tool. And excuse me if I'm talking really fast. I'm really trying to reach the time limit.
Oh, no,
So
we have more, just to give you a little relaxation, that since we have one less speaker, you have more, you don't have to rush.
okay, thank you. It is pre-recorded, so I'm kind of like keeping up with my own pace.
Oh, okay, well, that's...
So we have three ways of choosing an indicator. You can choose a featured indicator or you can go by the category. So each of the categories has a list. Some of them are grayed out because they're not available yet, but the team is working really hard on filling those in. And you can always search for a specific indicator. So for our example, we're going to use median household income. This is a general format of Explore Data. You have your title, which is the indicator. You have the source of the indicator. And then what's really cool about it is that we have three ways of visualizing data. So the first one is through a map. So you have a geography. Then you have through points in time, and you can do it by comparison. So you can compare it to a specific variable like location, year, race, ethnicity, or age. So we're going to go back to the filters pane, and I'm going to filter it down for a specific example. It's going to be census tract number 1307. And we're going to keep it for year 2020 for all races and ethnicities and all ages. You have to click on apply filters, and right away, you're going to see that the map changes. It's a color-coded map with a color-coded key. And if we zoom in a little bit, you're going to see that our census tract in question does get highlighted. And we have this really cool now viewing panel at the bottom left that changes as we hover over the map. So right now it's telling us that this census tract has a median household income of $17,115. If we hover over the rest of the map, you're going to see that that changes as well. That's just one way to navigate that map. Of course, we have a second way of visualizing the data, which is through points in time. For this census tract, we can see that the median household income went up from 2010 to 2015, and then it went down. And then our third way of visualizing the data is by comparison. So we're going to compare it to another location. Once you choose your variable, you can choose multiple options. But for our example, we're only going to choose one, which is census tract number 1915.04. We could compare, and right away we get this really cool chart. And for ease of explanation, we're going to call this one on the left census tract A, and the one on the right census tract B. As we've already established, census tract A has a median household income of $17,115. Census tract B has a median household income of $217,534. We do not need a calculator to see that. That's a $200,000 difference. But what's really cool about this chart is that it also shows it in different levels. Before returning to the map, I'm going to show you these cool features. For any of these visualizations, you can turn labels on and off. You can always download the data as a data file or as an image, so you'll get this exact chart that we're seeing on the screen. And my favorite is this share button. As soon as you click the share button, it auto-generates a link that you can then copy to your clipboard, and whoever opens this link is going to arrive at this exact same page without having to do their very own filtering, which is really cool. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we always have this info button where you can always learn more about the indicator or about the tool. So now that we've compared this region with another region, we're going to go back to the map and just for fun, see it back on the map. So this is census tract A, which makes sense. It's a much lighter color. It is a color-coded map. And we have census tract B. If you're not from San Antonio, just trust me, they're pretty far away. But if we're looking at the map, you can see that there's a similarly dark color, not too far away from census tract A. And of course, we're going to call it census tract C. And the now viewing panel tells us that it's about $217,361 median household income. And it's only one census tract away. So that being said, I am not here to convince anybody that San Antonio is highly income segregated, even though it is. What the purpose of this example is really to show you that in just a matter of minutes and clicks, we saw all of this really, really important information at our fingertips. And it really all goes back to the mission of CNOW, trying to make data accessible. So, something that's just a website away and easy to understand through the means of different visualizations and different ways of understanding and exploring that data. So if you can, please follow us on social media. We're on all of these platforms. And just as an example of what the types of things that we post, we like to share data stories. And the example that we just went through is actually one of our posts from December 7th. So we explored it in detail. And this is a team. So this is a CNOW team. And I'm actually going to let them answer any questions because they are much more data literate than I am, and they are much more familiar with Bear Data Dive. So thank you for the chance to present this.
All right, thank you, Jeanette. So yes, does anyone have any questions for the team?
I think just on the statistical areas, I think a few of us have done this over the years. We did it for DC and like, I don't know, that was like 15 or 20 years ago. But did you get any pushback of like, this isn't my neighborhood, and just how you came to the idea that a new geography, the payoff was there for reducing the margin of error, which I'm assuming is the main goal. I don't know who to ask.
I would punt that over to Jeremy since it kind of came out in our survey and user-centered design process, and put him on the spot since he's paying attention.
So you're right. It was to come up with geographies to reduce margin of error, to have a larger geography. It also is because San Antonio doesn't really have established neighborhoods. I mean, we have some here, but none that I think are recognizable or that people necessarily know what neighborhood they're in. So this was a way to have kind of an area that covered these kind of neighborhoods that were already here, but also that had a complete coverage of the entire county, because we didn't have that here before either. So everybody falls within that.
Oh yeah, it's so beyond the city. Yep.
Yeah, beyond
I
the
hadn't
city.
thought about that.
And also within the city. So there are some areas that are kind of, you're not in a neighborhood according to the neighborhoods we have here. So it gave us a whole complete coverage. And so we also went through a whole community feedback process where we put out a ArcGIS Online tool that had these areas and had people come in and say, this reflects my neighborhood, or no, it didn't. We did get feedback through that tool, and then also through just some social media posts that we were kind of asking about these tools. And that so through that we had to make some adjustments. There's small cities within the city of San Antonio, and people said, well, that's not really San Antonio, it should be within the same neighborhood. And it's true, because they are very different than their neighboring areas. So we separated some of those out. We also changed the name, because originally we were calling them super neighborhoods, and they didn't like that. So we went in and changed that, because we're like, oh, that's going to create confusion. So we went back and changed them to this SSA name to reduce some of the confusion. So lots of community feedback, and that's what drove what they look like, and also how we named them.
Thank you. And then, yeah, Anthony had a question too.
Yeah, I was just curious on the, with the, I think it was mentioned maybe this is the first, at least NNIP partner that's done a bilingual dashboard, and I'm just curious where in the process you went through, like the translation. Was it we developed the site and then you had the whole thing translated together? Was that done internally, externally? How did that work? Because that's definitely something that's on my radar.
So we decided at the very beginning of the project that we were going to eventually translate it, but because there's a lot to translate, it's a lot of content to translate, we hired that out through a company in Houston to do that work called Adept. So we waited until we had everything pretty established as far as the text plant and indicators and the naming and everything, and then we sent everything over to them as a big kind of bunch, right, for them to translate. of course, I think there's little things that get missed, so, and then new pieces that pop up that need translation, so luckily, we have Jeanette on staff who helped us with some of the small, quick translations that happen, including content that we continue to update, like announcements, for example, right? So any new announcements that we put out, we need to have those translated. Jeanette's been helping to translate those so that we can continue to do everything back and forth. Do that as well. I should also just quick mention two things. Johnson Center, who's presenting next, actually did the web development on this. So it was a great partnership with them, and great to be able to work with them on the web development piece of this. I also know that they have a Spanish translation dashboard coming out soon too, from our work with them, so that they're on the heels of that as well. From a project that they've been working on for a long time, they're doing all the Spanish translation as well. So Trish might talk about that. Anyways.
All right, and then Trish had a question. We should have plenty of time since we have two speakers. So yeah, head over to Trish.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. Yeah, thanks for the shout out, Jeremy. It was really cool. Brian is the guy on our team who does all the really cool web development. Such a cool dashboard. Yeah, I guess I had a question around the, I really like the term super neighborhood. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the most important stakeholder, clearly, but it's kind of interesting. With that, you mentioned community feedback. I guess my question was around, sorry, I had a lot of thoughts. With that feedback, were y'all like looking for, because I think you mentioned that in San Antonio there's not really like explicit names. What I found is usually the city will have like names, and then sometimes neighbors or residents have like other names for things. Did you find that there were names that kind of emerged that neighbors were calling like their areas or something like that?
I don't recall specific examples of where somebody said that it's not named correctly, other than the part with the city. That, you know, this is a small city, it's not part of San Antonio, but not really with the neighborhoods. Laura might have got some feedback on that, but it's at least through the tools and some of the we had, we didn't really have that happen. We did go through two different levels of feedback though. So there was the SSA's feedback where we put that out. We got a lot of community feedback through that, but also with the tool itself, before we even started developing, we went through a number of interviews and community focus groups for people to come in and talk about how they currently use data. What would they look like? What would they look for in a tool like this if it was, if it was developed? So all that was done through these bringing in people from all over the community, from all different data user types and everything, to talk about what this would look like. And then we developed from there, working with Brian to come through with some user stories and some wireframes before we even touched the development piece of it. So it's all been driven by that community feedback in order to create what we end up what you ended up seeing today. And then we also came back and brought everybody, or as many people as we could, back in from those focus groups once we had developed to do user testing sessions and say, did we hit the mark, or is there any changes that we need to make?
That's really awesome. The reason why I asked, and I think Cheryl dropped something too, is just like so many of our partners, I feel, at the Johnson Center, they'll use, like census tracts and things where you can obviously get the data from, but sometimes that doesn't mirror the way that neighbors talk about their communities, right, and the spaces that they live in. So I'm just curious about that. Really cool. Thank you.
We might end up running into that. We are just starting into doing more extensive work with our data, now the tools available, with data trainings, going out in the community and just having people use it. So we might end up running into it. I kind of suspect that we will. But the fact that the SSAs aren't really named in any way, yeah, it's just SSA 1, 2, 3, whatever. I don't know if they're going to have too much pushback on the naming of that, since we didn't go with the more traditional neighborhood names on it. That could change going in the future, that they actually get some kind of names. We'll have to see how the feedback goes and over the next year as we do these data trainings.
All right. Any other questions for the team? All right. Well, thank you so much to the Community Information Now team for that presentation. I know everyone's very excited to see a platform with that level of detail in Spanish. So that was really cool to see. Thank you. All right, well, Trish, I'll hand it back over to you for your presentation.
Okay, let's try this. Let's share screen. Y'all see that? It's not in presentation mode yet, but is it showing up?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Cole. And thanks, Jeanette. That was such a cool project. Really excited about it. Okay, so this is my first time with this group. And I'm really pleased to be here with you guys. Heard great things, and I'm really passionate about neighborhood-based work and evaluation. Myself, as a former organizer, automatic timing, sorry, and neighborhood association volunteer. So in addition to the applied research that I do with the Johnson Center. So thanks for letting me come today. Today's idea, I'll share it with you as a curation of key findings from this survey. It's the first statewide nonprofit leadership census in Michigan conducted last year. Some of you may recall that my colleague, Melissa Zai O'Brien, and our director, Jeff Williams, alongside one of our partners at Data Driven Detroit, Jordan Graves, presented on our methodology behind this project survey results to the NNIP group back in October. Today is going to briefly build on that work. We're sharing the good news that the report materials displaying all the findings are now public, and we'll go ahead and share those links with you as well. So the brief background is that the project was a collaboration with the Michigan Nonprofit Association and Data Driven Detroit. And the survey project came on the heels of, it was informed by a census of nonprofit leadership demographics in Detroit. And our goal was to build the first detailed data set about the demographics of nonprofit leaders, board members, and staff in Michigan, divided up into 6 regions that you can see here, with a focus on nonprofit leaders who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or using the acronym BIPOC in this state. And so on this next slide, you can see our research questions, and I'm going to share 3 things today with you all that focuses kind of on the first 2 around demographics and finances. Yeah, so that's what we'll do. Okay. So the first item is on the demographics of nonprofit leadership compared to staff. So we looked at 3 areas of an organization's employees, the executive directors, the board members, or the leadership of the organization, and the organization's staff. And so we found in the survey that the majority of executive directors, board members, and staff are white, but we can see more of a disparity at the staff level. Specifically, about 1/4 of directors and board members are BIPOC, while over 1/3 of staff members identified as BIPOC. And we'll see this information shown a different way, visualized through a series of donut charts. The green represents people who are white, and the blue, red, yellow, and other colors are folks of color. Black represents folks who don't know or preferred not to say. Again, we can see that the majority are white. Out of the BIPOC respondents, the majority are Black, and we can see that in the blue. So this is at the executive director level. We can see on this next chart that continues to hold, but we see that the proportion of white folks shrinks when we look at this at the staff level. Again, we can see that Black folks make up the majority of nonprofit staff members in Michigan. And then we can see this again, where that almost 3/4 of folks are white when we look at the board level. So really looking at that disparity between leadership and staff. And we see this mirrored in surveys at the national level, such as Race to Lead, the Urban Institute, and the Center for Effective Philanthropy, as well as many others who have been documenting and advocating to recognize and act on diversity in the nonprofit sector. From the advisory board that our team worked with and from just other conversations, it's not necessarily groundbreaking information, right? So much as it is a statewide attempt to document this moment in time. And now, since we're still looking at board membership here, one of the mechanisms for change, right, in the nonprofit sector that we have seen is with trustees or board members, because they drive so much of the direction and approaches that nonprofits take. So one of the findings to uplift here was that we found that BIPOC-led nonprofits tend to have more diversity on their boards than white-led nonprofits. You can see at the blue and the orange, either all BIPOC boards or a mix of races and ethnicities, including white folks, on the left-hand side for the BIPOC-led organizations. BIPOC-led organizations were also less likely to say that they didn't know the race or ethnicity of their board members, or that they preferred not to say, shown in the purple down here. Again, this reflects national findings such as those from Board Sources Index of Nonprofit Board Practices. And then the last finding I'd like to share with you guys is around the funding piece. So we were able to map over 500 organizations to over 900 funders. And if we segment out the BIPOC-led nonprofits and then compare them to the white-led nonprofits, over half of BIPOC-led nonprofits had no known funders, compared to a third of white-led nonprofits. So it shrinks that unknown number. So this starts to get at an information gap that could be attributed to a number of things, such as the IRS e-filing reporting requirements of small nonprofits or foundations. However, when we couple these initial findings with the survey findings that BIPOC-led organizations were more likely to report a smaller budget than white-led organizations, and that most BIPOC-led organizations report a budget of $50,000 or less, then we can start to ask better questions around how philanthropic funding is being allocated. And so,
Can you what does known funder mean again? Sorry, I must have missed it.
sure. So known funder is that we had for the 3 years of data that we looked at, the IRS Form 990 data.
Okay.
We looked at,
You tried to match them.
exactly. There was a match done and they didn't have anything that we could map onto. And actually, I wanted to show you guys the analysis that we did with that. This is one of the tools that's available publicly for folks to look at. What you're looking is a Kumu social network analysis map, right? It's divided up into the different regions of Michigan. You can filter it by BIPOC-led. You'll see the blue folks start to stand out. And then you can also filter it by white-led nonprofits and undisclosed nonprofits. And so the folks who were, to your question, Kathy, the folks who were not, we didn't have any data for, they're not going to be represented on the map there. So, okay. So yeah, I guess I was going to play with this a little bit, but you guys can let me know if you want me to play with it a little bit. But basically the core idea here is that Michigan mirrors these larger patterns and national conversations on the importance of representation, but more analysis, and this goes back to like the methodology conversation we had prior. We need more analysis to make clear exactly how nonprofit leadership in Michigan compares to the communities that they serve. Right now, the data that we have, we can say this is the snapshot, this is the picture of what we have, but we don't have the numbers to be able to compare that exactly to the different communities. Especially we heard feedback that folks really want to know how their own region, right? So we had those 6 different regions, how their numbers map. And on the interactive report that we'll share with you guys, you can look at those numbers, but we don't have the statistical significance to be able to make broad scale conclusions about it. So yeah, and then last thing is that we'll just go back up a level real quickly. I compiled some of the national studies that look at things like the nonprofit racial leadership gap, funding disparities impacting leaders of color, some of those major reports, and then project links, which you guys will get from our lovely MC Cole at some point. So yeah, that's all. Any questions or thoughts or reactions?
Yeah, Trish, what were some of the takeaways? So I think the Kumu map is really cool about showing sort of the beginning of showing how resources are flowing. So each node is a nonprofit. And tell me what the nodes are and what the lines are.
Yeah, and so the nodes are nonprofits, and then the connections go towards funders. So I guess there's both no
Yeah.
to funders and organizations, nonprofit organizations. If you click here, there's actually a walkthrough on the map that I'll show you real quick if my internet will comply. And if it doesn't, it's really easy walkthrough. And Sean did a really great job over at Data Driven to try putting it together. That starts to look at basically, you can track each nonprofit and look at the different connections. Hello. And look at the different connections to different funders.
Okay, cool.
Snap,
It'll be fun to play.
not
I'm happy with you.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions for Trish?
Are there other, I think I saw a Minnesota link. Are there other states that have, is this common? Do most states do this? Or is this a couple of them or?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Minnesota example was one of the folks that we were in contact with who had done something similar. We haven't seen too many other folks doing surveys like this. Yeah, at
Who's the funder?
Pardon me?
Did you mention who the funder was? I think it.
Oh, I don't think I did. The Knight Foundation funded the Detroit round, but I'd have to look up who the funder or funders were for this statewide round, and I can pass that along.
Yeah, I was just curious because people could think about parallel funders in their own community.
All right, any more questions before we wrap up for today? All right, well, thank you, Trish. That was definitely a very enlightening presentation. I thought the board composition figure was especially striking between white and BIPOC led organizations. So yeah, that's definitely useful information. Okay, well, since we only had 2 speakers today, we'll wrap up a little early. But thank you to Jeanette and Trish, our 2 speakers for today, and to everyone for coming out and participating.
Thanks, everybody. Remember, think about the Impact Award, and I'll be sending out the strategic planning updates in the next couple days. Have a great day.
Great to see everyone.